welcome everyone. I would like to welcome everyone here in this beautiful European Dome and also everyone who is watching online. My name is Alexandra Wisnerova and I'm a project manager at the European Institute for European Policy. And I welcome you all at the debate titled Democracy Back Then and Now, What Challenges Are We Facing? The debate is organized by European Institute for European Policy and also by the Democracy International, and with the great support from the Festival of Democracy, organized as a side event of the conference Forum 2000. I have three amazing guests here with me today, which I would like to kindly introduce. So on my right, it's Miss Linda Sukachova, who is director of the Amnesty International in Czech Republic. So welcome. Then it's Monika Megdona-Pajerova, which has a lot of great affiliations. So I don't know what you would like to prefer, but she's a Czech former diplomat. She is a former activist and also lecturer at the University of New York in Prague. And on my left side, it's Aleš Chmelař, who is Deputy Director for European Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic. So welcome everyone. Thank you once again. And now I would like to pass the microphone to Anne, who will really quickly introduce the project, why we're here in this dome, and what this actually means for the democracy now.
Yes, hi everyone. Also a warm welcome in this bad weather from my side. Thank you for joining us despite the rain. As Alexandra said, I'm Anne from Democracy International. And we've been touring Europe with this dome this summer, actually, since the beginning of this summer. This is our really last event of the tour, and it's called the Remember Tour of the European Public Sphere. So we hold debates in 6 different countries in places of remembrance. And inspired by the past, we want to talk about the future of Europe and gather ideas in public places, so really from citizens, from all of you, that later will put together in a catalog of ideas and hand over to European decision makers. As I said, this tour is called Remember, and it's part of the bigger project European Public Sphere, which we started in 2017. So if you want to follow us, join us. Hopefully we'll see all of you again soon. Why are we doing this year? Or actually we started last year with the first planning meeting to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Schuman Declaration. So the declaration in which former French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman mapped out a plan for a common agency for coal and steel for Germany and France and other countries to join, which later became the European Union. So a very important day to remember, and also the reason why we celebrate Europe Day every year in May. I think that's it from my side. I don't know if you want to say a few words about the place of remembrance we're at.
Well, I think we chose really not only this place but also Prague 1 as the heart of Prague, and I think we have a lot of and I think we should really appreciate what we have and we should talk about it. So that's why I chose this amazing panel, and I would like to really start because it's getting cold. And so I would like to give all of our speakers a few minutes for some introduction, really general, your point of view. What was your idea after the revolution? How it has changed from there, and what challenges really are we facing right now? What we should really work on, what we have learned, and I think we have a great discussion now. So I'll pass the microphone to Linda now.
Okay, so hello, my name is Linda Sukachova. I'm from Amnesty International Czech Republic, and I would like to focus mostly on the current situation and the challenges we are expecting in next days, in next months, in next years. I think that the basic information for the Czech Republic is that Czech politicians, Czech institutions, and I think also Czech public do not take human rights as a serious problem. So still it's something we can reach when we have the economic stability, when we reach, other issues, and then we can focus on the human rights. And I think it's one of the biggest problems, because without human rights, we won't have social justice, we won't have economic justice, we won't have climate justice, nothing like that. There's also another problem in the Czech society. It is very difficult to talk about social justice, and we as Czechs do not consider economic and social rights as a part of the fundamental human rights. So it's very difficult, to include all parts of the society into the human rights lens, into different policies and so on. But on the other side, the people who focus more on the economic and social rights, they tend to say that human rights are not very important for us. So, we have these two problems, I think, in our discourse. The another problem are so-called culture issues. Me personally, I do not consider them as a culture issues. So when we speak about LGBTQ rights or women's rights, many people say, these are these cultural problems. We need to focus on the economy. We need to focus on justice system and everything else. But I think these problems are part of the human rights policies and also part of the economic and social rights. Because, for example, for gays or lesbians or for women, the discrimination is issue of economic rights. It's an issue of to have some money to raise their children, to have their own life, and so on and so on. Also, in some countries, also in Europe, for example, LGBT people have lack the right to life or to security, because they face a lot of problems, violence on the street and so on. So I think it's a false view to consider LGBT or women's rights or ethnicity or the problem of ethnicity and racism as a cultural issue. In the Czech Republic, in recent months, maybe recent years, I think we face a problem with the position of human rights institutions in the Czech Republic. There's maybe some kind of erosion of this institution. Let's focus on the person of public defender of rights. I think we should be more interested in the position of public defender of rights. We should ask him to really follow the human rights policies and to and to analyze the problems from the human rights point of view, because I think it's not acceptable for European society to deny rights, for example, for Roma people or LGBT people, or even the rights of children, which is the latest problem of our public defender of rights. So, and we also do not have the human rights institution according to Paris principles, which is I consider it a very big problem, and I think it's very important that also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have some activities in this issue. They did an analysis on this topic, and I think that such institution in the Czech Republic maybe could help to improve the area of human rights in our country. And I think we need to speak not only about discrimination, about racism, sexism, or xenophobia, but also about how to build inclusive society, how to have more inclusive organizations and institutions in not only in the Czech Republic but also in Europe, because sometimes we Czechs tend to speak only about problems and not about the solutions, or even consider there could be any solution to our problems. So I think these are some point of views we should consider in the area of human rights and try to reach some consensus, or to be more interested, in the human rights policies and issues.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And maybe Ms. Perova, you can continue.
Thank you, Linda. That's a very good analysis. So I won't be long because you basically said it all. The situation in Central and Eastern Europe was underestimated 30 years ago by both the student movement, of which I was the spokesperson. That's how I started being active in public life here. And by the Civic Forum led by Václav Havel, which was the Czech version of the Neues Forum in Germany and of the Slovak Public Against Violence and Polish Solidarity, and then even Hungarian Fidesz, which turned into something completely different. I am teaching English-speaking students, mostly Americans, who come here to Prague to take the lesson from Nazism and communism and totalitarian regimes in general. And frankly, after having spent almost 15 years in Czech and European diplomacy, I was at the embassy in Paris, cultural attaché at the time when we were the golden children of Central Europe. Everybody was tapping us on the shoulders. And then I was head of the cultural committee in the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. So these were probably the 10 most successful years after 89. And I was not here. So with my daughter, we really regret a little bit that we missed that time, because we thought it will last forever. And when we came back, the situation was very different. It's not as bad as in Hungary, where Viktor Orbán turned into a real Eurosceptic and somebody who does not respect anything. And we already had troubles with him in Council of Europe. I remember it was already an issue then. We maybe are not that bad as Poland, where the society seems to be really split into two. But we are not what we used to be as long as Václav Havel was our president, and people like Jiří Dienstbier or Petr Pidhart or Dáša Burešová were active figures of the Czech political life. And my generation, which tends to be called the generation of 89, because we were 20-something 30 years ago, we are a little bit in between two worlds. We are mostly active in media and NGO world, universities as well, and a couple of us did try to be active in political parties as well. But I think the main problem of Czechoslovakia, these two countries, and maybe of Central and Eastern Europe in general, is that there is almost no link between a political party and the NGO sector, the civil society. And that is something that we kind of did know then, that it's very important. Václav Havel used to say, without civil society, you can build up institutions, you can have parliament, you can have government, you can have a Ministry of Foreign Affairs with very nice people at the moment. But as long as there is no blood circulating between political parties and the civil society, the grassroots, then the political parties will be dying. And we now saw it, to my real regret, with social democracy. Aleš is an active member of Czech Social Democratic Party, which I consider very important, because now after the crisis, with all the issues that Linda mentioned, basically in the Czech parliament, there will not be a party interested in women, children, human rights, ecological issues, culture, education. And the relationship towards European Union is a little bit ambivalent in that coalition of 5 parties. So it is an improvement after 8 years, because Mr. Andrej Babiš is a real criminal, and I hope he will end up in prison one day. And Mr. Miloš Zeman, who is still alive, hopefully, the president is seriously sick, probably mentally as well, as Jamila Stehlíková, our former Green MP, wrote it the other day. She's a medical doctor. From what she sees, she speaks about delirium tremens, so it's probably true. And these two people really destroyed the political life in Czech Republic. And during 8 years, it was really tough. So I will end up by saying that actually democracy in this country was saved by a network, which is called Million Moments for Democracy. They are young people of our age, 30 years ago. I was helping them from the first day because when I saw them, I thought, they are my children. They are like us, although we did not know each other. Interestingly, they do come from the background of Evangelic Church, which was the case of Joachim Gauck and the Neues Forum people in Germany. Interestingly, they are students, university students mostly, and interestingly, they do not fight for political power. And so when they were offered to be on candidate lists of political parties, they said, no, we will stay as an NGO, a very powerful one, watching the government and checking what will be going on. I think these young people who really were fighting in cold and rain and organizing demonstrations with very little means and originally with a lot of suspicion of media, etc., they did save Czech democracy after 8 years. So I think we should not forget about them, and we should be helping other groups of young people of this type, like Amnesty International or people in need, etc., etc. I am really curious to hear from Aleš Chmelař. How does he see the future of social democracy here? Because I still did not get it, I must say. I spent 10 years in France where I was not member, but I did help French socialists, and if I was in Germany, I would probably be a Green or SPD voter. So I am a little bit surprised, is an understatement.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Chmelař, your time.
Thank you. Hopefully I will not destroy the table with the wire. But thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me here and for the organization, and I would say the wonderful effort in building this thing under the rain. I just wanted to flag beforehand that I will not be able to be as explicit because I am part of the ministry, and some of my statements could be taken as official statements of the government, which is not the case, but it could be the case. So I will try to be more analytical and maybe more implicit. What I think is very important to say here when we speak about the current state of affairs is indeed to look in the past, and maybe also look at the causes of creation of the current situation in many countries, not just in ours, but in Central Europe, maybe in general. And I'm quite a pessimist in terms of medium-term future, in terms of developments, maybe even beyond Central Europe, in terms of human rights, in terms of democratic institutions. Why am I saying this? Is that I perceive in the society and in the, I would say, in the social fabric, a certain, destruction is a too strong word, but a certain corrosion. Mostly it is amplified by social media. I might come to detail actually of this. And it is an extremely erosive element. I mean, we've seen what happened on the 6th of January in Capitol. It would not have happened without social media. And I always tend to quote, although I'm not sure about the exact dates, but in April 1920, the first Czechoslovak elections took place. And it took about 1 week for the results to be published, to be counted and published. And nobody cared in between. Nobody, campaigned. Nobody, was having live interviews all the time. And there was a due time to somehow absorb also the result and to work on the result. What I also tend to say sometimes is that if Winston Churchill were forced to use Twitter, I'm quite sure he would lose the war. Not because he would not be able to make good tweets, he would be, but he would not be able, I think, to suffer the permanent pressure of the public and the need of reaction. He needed time to reflect, time to react. The government needs also time to react, and democratic institutions need time to react while we live in a world where an immediate response is the one that rules. And it is corrosive and erosive also towards media, because I'm not sure how you perceive this, but I have sometimes an impression that the old rules of journalism, for example, verify from two sources, the overall quotes and working with off material is somehow compromised by the competition from social media and by the need to put the information into the media space as soon as possible, and not having the time to verify the quality, and of course the truth of the very aspect. So I think this is very much a catalyzer of these changes. But at the same time, talking about the Velvet Revolution and being an economist, I also think that it is an issue of a certain, in the past 30 years, about a supply or demand. I think that people and politicians, they are still a certain supply, but what comes first, whether the demand or the supply? I still think that the demand is very much determining. So we need to be working actually also with what is materially happening actually in the country and what the citizens feel. But also, especially due to the social media, there is a certain negative feedback loop in terms of the reactions between the leaders and the people, especially in times where we are able to analyze basically live the mood of the population, be it through surveys which are slow now. Now we are able to analyze apparently, emotions of the people through social media. So you basically ask at any moment, and you are able to say what is the reaction of the people according to AI analysis of the emotions of the tweets or of the posts on Facebook. So this is something that basically creates a very fast, emotional, negative, I think, feedback loop between the leaders who are able to react, somehow raise some issue even further, and awake more emotions, which I think become more irrational in one way or the other. And one of the causes, I think, and we would be looking actually much more in the past than in, was also the fact that that we were not, I think, working, but we would not be able to avoid actually this negative feedback loop in one way or the other. But I think that in 1990s we have underestimated the economic transformation. People who know me know that I'm a big critique actually of the economic transformation, and somehow looked as if this was not also one of the key aspects of democratic transformation. And many people have somehow associated the economic crisis of 1990s, early 1990s or late 1990s, and then even afterwards, with democratic values in a way, because just time-wise it happened at the same time. The inflation in 1990 was over 35%, and this is something that people got, I think, almost immediately in association with the democratic changes. So the reaction, the first emotional reaction at the end of '89 was extremely positive. It was enthusiastic. But at the same time, then very slowly came a certain set of events that led to an association, emotional association of people actually between the economic crisis and democratic institutions who were being built live in front of the people. This plus this and the catalyzer of the social media, I think, lead us in a situation that will be, I am quite pessimistic in the medium term, not in the very, very long term. I think we will build the institutions to react to this, but not yet. We don't have them ready. But I think that very similar effects that we observe now in Central Europe might actually emerge very actively in countries where we would not have imagined that. I will not quote a country where we would not have imagined that, for example, 6 years ago, that it could happen, and it did happen. But in general, I'm quite pessimistic in the medium term, and what we need in the meantime, I think, is to create social institutions, or maybe just intellectual institutions, on maybe networks, but the way how to reflect and how to work ethically in the social media sphere, and how to work with information in general. And maybe last remark to explain this, from what I've heard, was that for dozens of years, maybe hundreds of years, after the invention of the book print, dozens of years afterwards, the second most popular and most printed book was The Hammer on was on witches or whatever. It was basically, I'm sorry, I'm translating directly from Czech, but it was fake news that had quite tremendous cultural impact in Central medieval Europe. And it took maybe hundreds of years when we created mental institutions and social institutions, how to work with literature and how to work with what is printed. And now we have something that is extremely fast, extremely new. It is extremely, I would say, attracting our attention all the time and manipulating our attention and our emotions all the time, because the algorithms start to work automatically. And unless we try to, create institutions and mental frameworks how to work with this new type of information, I'm afraid that the situation in terms of democracy, respect of the democratic institutions and of human rights will be worse and worse.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, as we would like to include you as the audience as much as possible, I ask if you have any questions now. If not, I will actually ask my questions because I have a lot. But you have some time now. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for such an interesting presentation so far. And my first question is for Ms. Monika Pajerova. I was thinking, do you think that the results of Czech election may indicate a decline in populism in Central Europe? And then my second question is for all of you. I was wondering, what do you think about our president's behavior? I mean, for example, hiding his health condition, because don't you think that we as a society are dependent on him, right? And I think that we have the right to know about his health. Or for example, Ms. Linda Sokacheva, you were talking about human rights. And Zeman is known to be close to China and Russia, which are countries that are like ignoring human rights. So I was just like wondering, what do you think about his behavior? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, because I keep thinking about it all the time and speaking about it with my American and European students. Unfortunately, Czech Republic, like many other countries, seems to be split into, like cut in two. And Mr. Babiš and the Czech populism is not beaten. It's so narrow, the difference between those who got into the parliament and have a slight majority of 108 votes and himself with the right-wing party, that it's very fragile, and that creates space for messing of Miloš Zeman, who will try as long as possible to make the situation unclear. And it may happen that Andrej Babiš, the populist number one in this country, our Viktor Orbán or Mr. Kaczynski, will be candidate for the presidency. And my fear really is that as the Czech society, Aleš said it, Linda said it, is really cut in two. And we could discuss about, is it social media? Is it the non-existing solidarity in the country? Is it the bad managed COVID situation? We had 30,000 people who died here, which relatively is a lot compared to an Ireland where my husband comes from, or to France where we partly live with my daughter. It's a lot, and the society is really in a kind of trauma that will be long term. Everybody lost somebody, everybody was touched by it, and there will be not only a health crisis but economic crisis, which means social crisis, and social crisis always brings or economic crisis always brings political crisis. So unfortunately, Aleš is a little bit right. I did not want to be that negative, but since you started, our only way forward is to be members of European Union, active members of European Union, and try to stay rooted in Europe no matter what happens, because that's our only way. We are not a small country, we are like middle-sized country, but outside of Europe, outside of that network of cultural and traditional values, let's say, we would be really lost as a country. Unfortunately, some people say that countries that went through Nazism and communism, who out of 100 years when they were founded around here, these republics spent half of the time under a totalitarian regime, and that we did not really recover from it. Just take it, if somebody lived for 100 years and he or she would spend 50 years in a Nazi concentration camp or in a communist Russian gulag, what can you expect from that person? What can you expect from this country? And so that's why it's so important to be part of Europe, although, of course, European Union is not an ideal community, but it's the best solution we have at the moment. And if we were in a normal European country, I think Mr. Zeman would be already declared either insane or incapable of, François Mitterrand was also hiding his cancer and his 2 wives and his daughter and whatever. I was very badly surprised because Mitterrand was, somebody whom I really appreciated. But it cannot last forever. In a country like France or Germany or Ireland or wherever in the West, it cannot last forever. Here, unfortunately, we are in Central and Eastern Europe. It can last for a long time. And that's why it's so important that young people like you are willing to come, even in the rain, even in the cold, and that you are interested. Because you could also pack your rucksack and go studying. West Berlin is very funny at the moment. Paris is still very nice. I really appreciate every Czech young person who is willing to live here and try to continue in what we started. Really, really, I really mean it.
Does anyone else wants to react on this? First on the question. Okay.
I would be just too historical again, but and I cannot be concrete in calling out single countries for the reason that I said in the very introduction. But it's very, I would say, brave to say a normal European country, because when you go individually, then none of the European countries is in a way completely normal. I know where you the direction that you talked about.
European country that did not live under these 2 regimes, like France, Sweden, Ireland.
That's one of the
Germany.
definitions, I think, and I think that now looking more towards Eastern Europe, from my recent experience when I was traveling a little bit around, looking at how things are developing, and to be completely honest and open, basically nowhere in Eastern Europe the situation is getting better in the past 5 years. I think also for the same reasons as our democratic institutions deteriorate in Central Europe, the reasons are quite the same. I will be very general, very abstract, sorry for this. But what I have to also observe is that there is a certain hope and failure cycle in also Central Europe, but maybe more even in Eastern Europe. At every single hint of a certain change, there was, the impetus and the, I would say, the speed of change, or the time frame of change was quite short, and then basically the old structures have come again in, or the new structures have actually become the old structures. So basically the people, they have lost in many instances any hope in terms of that any change can bring something new, because it was always very temporary. I cannot be concrete in terms of countries, but we are facing, even in countries where I see a glimpse of real optimism in terms of recent electoral changes, in case that this cycle comes again into a failure, then we might see finally definitively, I would say, a long-term deterioration and backpedaling on democratic values. So the hope is nice, but we really need to be now very much aware also in Europe in terms of how we work with the country to somehow get back actually to somehow pay back the fact that, for example, this country has chosen a more European future. To be really able to work concretely on this. And I don't want to be too long, but I have an impression that in our case, the people in Central Europe, they have come through different very typical crises, economic crises. First in 1990, and the second one in the second half of 1990s. And when times seem to be quite optimistic, and there was support, for example, for the membership of the Eurozone. It was over 60% in the Czech Republic in just after the accession and before the accession, and in the run-up to the 2008, 2009, and then to the economic crisis. There was a huge optimism. There was a huge, I would say, increased trust in democratic institutions. Then the economic crisis came, and then second recession, by the way, by 2012 and 2013, linked with the Eurozone crisis and with the austerity. And at that time, I had a certain impression that that was the hope and failure cycle that has happened also in the Czech Republic. And a lot of what we are somehow collecting today in terms of democratic deficit or corrosion of democratic institutions, I think has its origin in this failed hopes. How to work with it, I'm not sure, but as a really medium-term pessimist, I would say that we sometimes need to also calm the positive emotions sometimes, or try to be realistic and maybe hope for the best but prepare for the worst in a way. So I replied very indirectly, but I hope at least to some extent it was understandable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Technical.
Of
Can
course.
I am thinking about something that I want to write about, and since we are rather a workshop or seminar than conference, tell me, what do you think? I think more and more, and I am a Czech patriot. I am actually a patriot from the Sudeten, where I was born, next to Děčín, little village. I think I am quite patriotic Czech, but I am very European. I speak French, German, English, try Irish now, whatever, Swedish. I tend to think more and more that it will be less and less important in Europe, in the European Union, whether we are Czech or Polish or German or French, but the important thing will be what values are we standing for. And I personally feel better in a company of people like you, and I have no idea what nationality you are. And I think we have to rethink a little bit this idea of Europe of the regions or Europe of the nation states or whatever. And the first step may be European lists to the European Parliament, where German, French, Czech, Polish people will be standing not because they are Czech or French, but because they are standing for certain values. And I think we really would need that as a network, because my feeling is that the political parties, which are rather fractions in the European Parliament, do not really work in this way. Mr. Babiš is member with his so-called movement of the European party that should be okay, and they don't do anything about it. Mr. Orbán with Fidesz were EPP for a very long time, and they did nothing. So I think European lists composed with people from European countries, not based by nationalities, but on values. What do you think? Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, thank you. I will do the article. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Sokachova, do you want to react on anything?
I just wanted to add that it is really not only case of the Czech Republic where the democracy, the problems of democracy, because the COVID times show us that we need to be really cautious about the democratic institution, about the human rights, not only in the Czech Republic, not only in Poland or Hungary or Slovakia, but let's see France, for example. Because I think French citizens, they face a lot of problems, some efforts or many efforts by the French government to suppress basic fundamental human rights, right to protest. There are many efforts, how to make police forces less accountable. So it's not just the problem of the Czech Republic or, the old communist countries, but it's problem also in traditional Europe or in old Europe. I think it's a great dream to have a Europe based on values and, to value democracy, human rights, and so on. But we also can see that some policies are really based on the nationalities, or we can see the situation in Great Britain, and it's it's not based on the European values we maybe expected like 20 years ago. But yeah, you know, it's not just us who have problems, but maybe we in the Czech Republic are like less optimistic. Or
After 8 years
yeah, we have here's less people who are willing to be active in this in these problems. So it's not just the Czech problems, but maybe we are active in different ways, and maybe we tend to we don't like trade unions, we don't like feminists, we don't like students fighting for climate justice. So then we do not have, you know, opportunities or tools how to fight the problems with democracy.
Maybe just a reaction or another hypothesis actually to the value division rather than geographic division theory, as I acknowledge, and I quote, or I don't quote, but I will quote you when I use this in my future, for example, public speeches. But I agree with you that geography and nationality is in a way less determining or less important, especially in Europe. At the same time, I'm not sure whether what is it can be values which divide us, but I will maybe add one aspect, and that's the dichotomy between core and periphery, sometimes simplified as urban and countryside, but it's very simplistic, because the core and periphery works globally, it works on a continental level, it works on a country level, it looks even on an urban level. You have core and peripheries which are somehow, even in very much detail, even in individual families, you can find this even, I would exaggerate a little bit. And this core periphery division goes also very much into the value sphere, and there, especially the core, people from core, mostly I would simplify from urban centers, they tend to have much less common with even their compatriots than they have with people from core of other countries, and that is completely true. At the same time, those people from periphery, very often they do not have the means, tools, or for example even linguistic capacities to know this, that they have also this very common, that they are much maybe closer to somebody from countryside in a completely different country, and so they are more tending towards the nationalistic interpretation. But in reality, I think you are completely right. I mean, it's values in a way, which I don't think it's maybe the primary thing. It's maybe the expression of their how would I call it? Maybe sometimes needs or the material part maybe of it, the feeling maybe whether they are as part of the core or periphery. But certainly they have also a lot in common, and Europeans have a lot in common, but the incapacity maybe sometimes to communicate, to be able to share and understand, because the specificities are different, linguistic capacities are maybe also limited, if I were to be very stereotypical, leads to divisions inside Europe, and to greater even dichotomization between the urban parts, or I should say core parts and the periphery parts. But in a way it's values, yes, but I think it's even deeper in terms of how exactly it is divided. It comes to different values at the end, that's true.
Another hypothesis. Would you, as Czech Social Democrats, not be in a different situation if you worked closer with SPD in Germany and La République En Marche in France and the left-wing parties in Ireland and Britain? Wouldn't it be easier to explain to the voters in Ostrava, in Northern Moravia here, who do have social needs, but they do not vote for Social Democrats? That was the strongest region of yours. Mr. Zaorálek must be... They rather vote for the populist, Mr. Babiš, or for extreme right-wing parties like Mr. Okamura, because they do not know that in Germany and in France, socialists or social democrats do have answers to their questions. And if there is something that I would criticize you as a party with whom I really sympathize, because you were for Europe, you were for things that I am standing for, is that there was very little communication on the European level between different social democratic, socialists, and even Green parties. The failure to join forces with the Green Party here was the beginning of the end, I think.
I will not monopolize it, I hope. But I have a lot of answers, sorry for that, but I will try to be short. I think that there is, we do not have a natural experiment how to compare political systems exactly, because the parties are different, demand is different, and it's difficult to compare. Therefore, yes. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I see. Yeah. Thank you for remarking that. So there are political families, but they might actually have not completely different electorates, but rather different electorates. I was really surprised by the analysis coming from German elections now that actually the Green voters are the wealthiest inside Germany. They are wealthier than the CDU voters in a way, which shows also, let's say, I would say, different perspective on the left side of German politics in a way. But what, as I said, we do not have a natural experiment how to test differences between different countries and in different perspectives, maybe in Eastern Europe or Central Eastern Europe and Western Europe. But we have a great case of Germany after the reunification, where you see that the dominant cleavage in Eastern Länder is actually much more tilted towards Die Linke and Alternative, while in the rest of Germany it's much more about SPD and CDU or Greens and the rest in a way, but also between FDP and the Greens. But there are different cleavages, but the dominating, I think, cleavage still in Eastern Länder, with the exception of Berlin maybe, as a clear case of a core, is very, very similar to the cleavages we have in Czechia, maybe in Poland also, and that tends to be to have the left electorate much more conservative in a way, and very much consistent also. Why am I saying this? Is that 80 to 90% of the current, I'm exaggerating, 80 because there was a generational also exchange, but it's something about 80% of the current support for ANO movement actually comes from social democrats. And the question would be, what would be the, since, you know, the modern left politics of that sometimes portrayed that are done by the pirates are actually in the main cleavage now in the current elections with the former social democratic electorate. So it's, I think it's mission impossible in the post-communist Europe, I think, to do exactly the same politics as the same political families in the West. If my point is understood, I hope. Again, sorry for monopolizing.
Thank you very much for all your inputs. Let's have another question.
Thank you. I have two questions. One's for Amnesty International and the other is for economics. And I would like to say that I am a history professor who will be 87 years old this month. And I've been teaching at Charles since I retired in the United States. And I've had the opportunity since 2008 to really have a lot of affection and respect for my students and the people that I've gotten to know here. When I was in the United States, I was at two different institutions. I started chapters of the students for Amnesty International. And they had regular meetings. They wrote letters to other countries. They were not to write to their own country, but protesting someone's being in prison. And since I am losing my eyesight and I'm not going to be able to teach anymore, I would like to see if it's possible to start some student groups in high school and in universities of Amnesty International, so the students would be acquainted with the issues as they were going through their education. And that's one reason I came tonight, is to say I'd like to see that happen. I don't know if there are any groups like that or not. Are there? Oh, then I'm way behind time. I did not know that. None of my students had ever participated. So I did not know that you had those groups, but I'd love to be a part of that. Okay, my question for economics is I just been struggling with a book that was published in 2017, having given a lecture on inequality in American history in December of 2019. I was quite fascinated to be reading this book. The subtitle is Inequality from the Stone Age to the 21st Century. And the very thesis of the book is that the only time inequality is not addressed is, number one, when there's a war, number two, a revolution, number three, the state falls apart, and number four, there's a pandemic. And I don't think we want any of those things to happen. So my question for you is whether or not there's any possibility of addressing inequality without having disaster. Thank you.
I think my question would be for Aleš Chmelač, but maybe it could also be answered by all of you. And I'm actually curious. We still do not know what kind of next government we're going to have, who's going to sit where, and so on. But I would be quite curious if you think we might see a shift from, let's say, this idea of economic diplomacy to more value-based foreign policy in Czech Republic. So if you think we're going to see this, and how might it look, and the general process of it all. Thank you.
Me too, thank you. First of all, thank you all for a very refreshing talk here today. I'm very blown away. I was not expecting this. I'm a Czech Canadian European, so I love your idea. Yeah, so we're on the same boat here. Yeah. Exactly. And my question, well, I have several questions. I have to kind of, I guess, I'll get back to more questions maybe if we have more time later. But it's with the recent election. So speaking of democracy in the SPD party, the far right party, I think the results were, I think was around 500,000 votes were around there, which completely shocked me. I was very shocked, and as still a proud Czech, I was really shocked by this. And before the elections, looking at the billboards on the side of the highways, and for the SPD party, it was like no to Islam, no to migration. So speaking about human rights, and this was, as a Canadian, this would never ever be allowed in Canada. Absolutely not. It's extremely undemocratic, against human rights. So my question is, how, as a European country, is this even legal here? How I know there's freedom of speech, okay, but as politicians, people who are supposed to represent the population, how is this allowed to go? And then talking about social media, the 500,000 that voted for this far right, how can we as Europeans, as Czechs, influence people more in a positive respect, to make it more understanding, to be more European, to really share these values of human rights, and not I just wonder how social media is really impacting this mindset, and how do we filter? Can governments use a filter kind of? What we can't. It's freedom of speech. So what can we do? What's the answer? I know it's a big one, but we'll start there. Thank you.
Okay, too many questions, and I don't know which one to start, but yeah. Okay, we have a quite strong human rights education program in the Czech Amnesty, and I think every year we do workshop and seminars for at least 10,000 students, except the COVID year. So this program is quite strong. So we have some school groups, but mostly on the high schools. Then we have groups in regions, in different regions of the Czech Republic, and we have also the Prague group and English-speaking group. So because some, foreign students come to the Czech Republic, they know Amnesty from their country, so they join our English-speaking group. They have their own program, so it would be great to speak about possible cooperation with you, with your students, and so on. And still, we are not we are smaller section than Amnesty in France or in Germany. They have 100 people there, so we are just 20. But I think the good news is that we are independent section now, and maybe from next year we will be contributing to the global movement, because till 3 years ago we were dependent of the money from richer countries, European, USA or Canada, and now 3 years ago it changed, and maybe next year we start to contribute to sections in South America or in Africa, in Asia. So I think maybe it says something also about the Czech civic society, that there can be NGOs, organizations who are independent of the government money, European money, or corporate money. So it really would be great to cooperate with anyone here on our human rights education program, because it's in the global amnesty, human rights education is the most important approach. So yeah, it would be great. And I think regarding the extremist parties, political parties, yeah, we have Tomio Okamura and his party, and I think his speech, his language is really very extreme. I think during the election time it was like sometimes maybe it was like be impossible to hear what he's saying. These were like clear lies about the migration, about European Union, but unfortunately he's not alone there. And I think that this anti-migration approach, anti-migration stance, and or anti-Roma approach is being somehow normalized in the Czech society, and also maybe some of the next governmental parties also tend to have the anti-immigration speech, or they blame Roma people for problems in the Czech society and so on. So yeah, we have Tomio. He's very rude, very aggressive in his speech, and it's like becoming like worse and worse. But still, we also need to keep very clear our eye on the traditional political parties like Civic Democrats, Social Democrats, Communists, and so on, because it's very important. And when we speak about the democracy and human rights, I think we also need to remember, or not to forget, about other very important actors, maybe actors who are more powerful now than the states, and these are corporations, and they are framing the democracy, the human rights approach. Aleš already has spoken about social media. So we have Facebook, we have Google, we have other corporations who are very important actors in human rights area.
Foreign affairs, if it's true that the two candidates are being considered, Ondřej Kolář is mayor of Prague 6, and his background is very good. His father was my colleague in foreign affairs for almost 15 years, ambassador in Stockholm, Dublin, Moscow, Washington. Petr Kolář, the father, is really a figure, and his son is, I hope so, sharing his values. So that would be a good choice. And Martin Dvořák, the other candidate, was a very successful mayor of Hradec Králové for a small party which used to be called Volba pro město, Choice for a City, which is actually quite socially conscious and a little bit ecological, etc. So Martin Dvořák would not be a bad choice either. Actually, it's very good that nobody is interested that much in foreign affairs in this government, and we may end up with really interesting people. And it's important because we will have the presidency next year, and the last presidency, frankly, was a little bit of a disaster. I don't know if Aleš remembers, but exactly, I tried to remember the good part, which was we founded an NGO which was called Yes for Europe, Ano pro Evropu, with Václav Havel and other friends from the Civic Forum and Dissident Times, and we made the public campaign, and the result was 56% for our membership. So we were very happy, and we thought the work was done and goodbye, and we all went backwards to our universities, media, and etc., where we came from. If the referendum was today, I really don't know what the result would be, but I hope I would be still able to mobilize a group like Unfortunately, most of my colleagues from that group are now dead, which is absolutely horrible. My chairperson was Václav Havel. I had Jiřina Šiklová on the board. I had Jan Sokol there. But I still have Daniel Kroupa, who is alive. I have Tomáš Halík, who is alive. Jiří Pehe is alive. So I hope I would be able to, replace from your generation. And I really, really would be fighting until the last breath if there was an attempt even of a Czechzit, because what we see in Great Britain is a real lesson for everybody, and I hope everybody gets it.
Thank you.
There was a question from the back also. I'm not just no, maybe later. I don't know, but just I feel guilty because from before. No, okay, good, thank you. No, but very much just on your question on the crises and the, I would say, only moments when we are concerned actually with inequality. I don't have a clear answer, but I am even though I'm, as I said, medium term pessimist. I really in the very long term, I think that the consciousness of the issues and problems we are talking about today will actually bring us to create again institutions, but I don't think institutions by buildings with people and officials inside, but some patterns of behavior that would actually guarantee a structural decrease of inequality. And I think that the core periphery issue that I talked about is very much so it is so risky for the stability and for the stability of the democratic system, but for the stability of the states also, that at the end especially, but we will need to go through. I'm afraid. I'm not sure, but I think we need still a bigger wake up call, and it's still not there. We still think, and I'm. This is a very personal comment, I think, but I am. My first result, my first reaction to the elections was actually a prediction that in 4 to 8 years' time the situation would get worse in terms of illiberal. Voters or illiberal voters, it's not really the good term, but maybe yes, illiberal thinking, politics or illiberal politics in general. But I think that so I think it might be actually get worse before it gets actually better, and now for different reasons. I don't want to be too pessimistic on this, but it's not everything is over. It's still under the cover somehow, and we need to be able to tackle it. And we have many events in world history which have been, I think, strong wake up calls. Be the Yellow Vests, the 6th of January that I talked about in Capitol, for example. But still, I don't think the reaction to the elections, like everything is fine now, that's great, actually convinced me that it's not fine at all. That we have.
You are so.
Yeah.
Because center-left people are now silent, but they don't know what to think.
Like, a social democratic party that was founded here more than 100 years ago, that does not exist practically. That is a real shock. Like, I try to talk to people who founded it here after 89 and who were in European Parliament and who were linked to the socialist parties in Europe, and they are amazed as well. So I think we will need time to realize what really happened and to start, as Tomáš Putříček put it, probably from scratch with different people, young people like you, probably. But this country does need a democratic left. I am persuaded about it. Democratic, pro-European left, socially conscious.
But the issue is, and I will maybe connect it very shortly with the question that came about the billboards and the statements. Unfortunately, the dichotomy or the difference between the political systems that I have tried to describe between East and West, and the effect that in Eastern Germany it copies actually the patterns in other post-communist Europe, I think shows that it is a real issue in Central and Eastern European politics. that this pattern actually leads more to a debate getting completely and only cultural, so basically liberal against extremely conservative, or how to call it, basically nationalistic, xenophobic. The tendency and the inherent, I would say, tendency of the Central and Eastern European systems would tend and tilt more towards this interpretation. When people actually, because they do not feel that there is any I would say reason for voting to higher wages or something, because the wages are all the time the same or inflation will steal it, they get in much more into the culturalizing some of the topics, especially with xenophobic comments. But I think that on the very ground it is still social and economic, the issues that they are dealing. For example, with our panic and psychosis, I would say, about migration in 2015, but almost medical psychosis, because people were physically afraid of the wave of migration, but it was also a certain effect of the fact that we have lost borders inside the Czech Republic. I mean, Czech Republic has lost its borders in a way, because we are fully emerged in Schengen. There is only Luxembourg as the other country who is fully emerged in Schengen with no non-EU country or seaboard, which is quite exceptional actually in many. I mean, we are basically one of the two only countries basically without borders. And yet we saw people, coming from conflict zones with no, not knowing where exactly is the border and what will stop them. The people started to fear. I don't think that they were fearing the people in a way. I'm an optimist on this, but they were fearing the conflict, the disaster that was happening there, and the fact that they are not secured in one way or the other. And let us not forget this, that it was also 2 years after very strong austerity period inside the Czech Republic, which was argued and supported by arguments such as, you do not need, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but we do not have money for you to give it to you, to the pensioners, to give you higher wages. But yet now suddenly we have money and resources to receive 1 million people. So there was really, let's say, from different angles, arguments that came into this moment of a certain psychosis, collective psychosis, but still with some roots which I think could have been dealt with also on economic grounds. I'm quite convinced that if the austerity was not so strong, and in the years just before, that the reaction would not be as strong. But there are other cultural aspects, I think, that they are stronger. For example, the non-experience, the lack of experience of Central and Eastern countries with the post-Second World War positive migration story, with the Gastarbeiter in Germany, with the great economic boom, which many peoples from Northern Africa and beyond were contributing, and from Turkey were contributing to in terms of growth of Europe. This is a positive experience that Central and Eastern Europe in those terms did not have. So it's also, I think, very specific on this. We've somehow tried to, not always, but I used it just once, but the word multiculturalism, even though it is inherent for Central Europe, we've heard it for the first time from an Austrian politician called Jörg Haider, in a negative sense. Already in early 1990s, mainstream politicians such as Jacques Chirac, they were trying to already put in a certain perspective the critique of ghettoization in France. And then 9/11 and many other aspects that create this Islamophobia. So there are different reasons for this, and I think that Czechs are actually not more xenophobic than any other nation in the world, but different circumstances, different historical perspective, and also this negative feedback loop, or this feedback loop of politicians who are actually, catalyzing the emotions, which are there, but they are making stronger, makes the situation very unstable and almost impossible to eradicate if you do not address the material reasons. But I'm coming back to this issue for the 10th time maybe. And the last question was commenting on the leadership of or about the ministry. I'm not sure I can really comment on this.
You cannot. That's why I said it.
So let's.
If I may clarify, it was not about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because I understand the Czech foreign policy is weirdly split between, let's say, 3 actors, and it's not that usual abroad. So I was more thinking about the whole of Czech foreign policy, not just the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the value-based approach versus economic approach.
I'm really convinced that there is no single country in the world that has only and purely 100% either or the one or the other.
Here it's
but and it's about very much about the balance between the two. There are countries that if you talk to them and you talk only in value terms, they will not understand you. and there are countries where you talk only in material terms, they will not understand you. And the role of diplomacy on foreign policy is to get understood, if you know what I mean. So.
Well done. That would be a Minister of Foreign Affairs. Next time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions from? Yeah.
And there's another question down there as well.
Yeah.
I think it is very important to make that connection between the democratic side of things and economics, and that how economics can be must be value laden, but when we're thinking of the issue of democracy, it's often considered like a topic of governance. But so we mentioned earlier, I think at the start of this, tools of promoting democracy, and obviously we're all familiar with like voting mechanisms, but I'm thinking, how can we implement more economically oriented mechanisms to empower regular people and the public at large, regionally in Europe, even further afield? Things like universal basic incomes, raising living standards. I can see all this kind of contributing to the development of civil society, which is, a prerequisite of democracy. And how can we strengthen that? We mentioned here with the professor, the book, like what the latest pandemic is one of the causes for talking about inclusion. And now that the vaccines have rolled out, we see the periphery and the core. The core seems to have lost its this focus on inclusion. They certainly had it when they were worried it would affect everybody, including them. But now that the vaccines are so effective, that seems to be off the radar somewhat. But yeah, look, I think we need to think about this aspect of things. How the European Union has responded with the pandemic recovery fund. Is this a tool that we could seize, make it more green, make it more inclusive, more and raise the living standards of people far and wide? To stay, and make like a European social dividend, for instance, or something like this to make people feel genuinely European. That's a comment.
Děkuji. Hi. I am an independent journalist from the USA, and I spend part of every year in Prague. So I'm actually from San Francisco, so the thought of the core and the periphery is very familiar to me. I am from the core. So my question, listening to what all of you are saying, is what lessons do you think people in the USA should draw from recent and current Czech and Central European history, apropos of what you've been discussing? And thank you.
Democracy is never here forever. It has to be taken care of. I think social media should be replaced more and more by real relationships. I find it really interesting that in my little village in the Sudeten, which, yes, copy what Aleš said about the Sudetenland, basically is still a Sudetenland. In our village, where there are 300 voters, there was not a single politician personally during this campaign. All people could see was huge billboards, posters. Those who were lucky could go to Děčín, which is a regional town, but nobody was in our village. And I really dream about a time when, again, like we used to do it, the students in 89 or Civic Forum later on, or even Civic Movement later on, Social Democrats in the beginning, Top 09 in the beginnings, Green Party in the beginnings. Politicians used to travel around the country. They used to talk to people face to face. And that's the only defense I see against social media. Because in my village, nobody uses social media. They are not influenced by anything because they don't have access. They are not interested. They are not the target group or age group. But they would really love to see somebody coming from the core and talking to them. And that did not happen for some time. So that's democracy for me, being in constant contact with people.
Okay. Thanks for the remark about the universal basic income and these tools how to improve democracy or justice in the society. I think it's very important, maybe the most important thing for our probable next government, to understand that we need social and economic justice, that only in a social and economic justice everybody can enjoy fully their human rights. Because without social and economic justice, people can't enjoy their human rights. We can see it in the Czech Republic, for example, if we consider the Roma population or people in bad housing conditions, they can't enjoy their fundamental human rights like education, for example. We know that children from inadequate housing in the Czech Republic, they tend to have worse educational results than the rest of the society. So I think it's a very important thing to understand and not to see it only through the political or like ideological lens, but we should try to understand the situation of vulnerable groups in the society and try to understand their positions. For example, why they vote for Andrej Babiš and not for Social Democrats or other democratic parties. So I think it's very important issue, and it's very problematic in the Czech society. For example, Amnesty International has changed a lot in recent years. We are not only about fundamental human rights, we deal with the social, climate, economic justice, with taxes and so on. But it's very difficult to talk in the Czech society about justice concepts. Some people take it as some root word or some concept from the communist times. So it's we need to learn a lot, maybe from United States in this regard, about the social justice, economic justice, and how to reach it.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Chmelar.
Difficult questions. I will start with the basic income, or in general the social dividend, as we talked about it, the European social dividend. I am, analytically speaking, I would consider myself a critique of the money-based EU policies in general. I think that Europe is based on rules, not on the redistribution yet. I mean, then the ambitions would need to be really much bigger if it has to fulfill this role. But the real added value is not the money, because the money it can come from government, it can come from the EU, it can come from individuals. So it's not the money. I think that if we want to have something that is both in a way economic, helping all the issues that we talked about here, it needs to be an added value of Europe per se. And I will quote just one example, or two short examples. One is the Umberto Eco's idea of Erasmus for all. Because Erasmus today, I think, even though it has an opening because more people have access to universities, so it's also connecting, let's say, the peripheries or periphery and core, still it's designed so that it maybe just reinforces the communication between different cores of different parts of Europe, but it does not contribute to the cohesion of the people from the periphery in a way, so it does not actually have any positive effect on the nationalization of the debate in different countries, or on the xenophobic elements, or not as much as it could have. So a program that would connect more people, the improbable, unintuitive people actually from different regions, would be something that I think would greatly contribute to something. It would be maybe less expensive than the universal basic income, that I don't like too much, because it removes completely the labor component of your life, which might be problematic. I mean, not per se, but that would be for a completely different discussion. And the second example is roaming, or not roaming, but yes, roaming charges inside the EU. We are now discussing for Eastern Europe, Eastern partners, and for Western Balkans, possibilities of something of a progress on roaming fees, which I think is very much a lot of value for not much money in a way. because it shows, as I said, the added EU value, because it connects people on a personal basis, and it's not necessarily about money. And I don't want to speak for the others, but I felt really European not when Schengen was introduced to Czech Republic, because you do not travel really every day, but the feeling that you can not just travel, but you will be somehow mobile and connectable every day. That was the final, I would say, step into Europe. And so I would not aim at the money policy necessarily at this stage, because we are not there in terms of the federalist debate inside the EU, but those quite low-hanging fruits in terms of re-enhancing them could have, I think, major effects on the perspective of Europe in citizens' eyes. In 180 times or 80 years, no, 120, I don't know, how long did it take actually for the USA to become a full federation? I'm not sure, maybe 140 years. So we have still about 90 years in Europe, or maybe 80. At one point, yes, I think the budget part would also come as a component, but I'm not sure that would be the current possibility. The other question I forgot, I wrote it down, but I talked too long already. It was on the, or maybe I will, if nobody wants to. What was that? What lessons to read? Oh, yeah. That's very complicated question. I'm not sure that I would have one sentence to tell you that would be somehow, but maybe trying to, I think that what is extremely negative, and I work with that, very often in my life, in my work life, that is the lack of understanding between East and West in general. And I know that it would not be your case, but looking at the Eastern history or Central and Eastern European history with a certain respect, in terms of trying to see the causes and consequences of things, helps a little bit to show that we are extremely similar people, but with just very much different histories and backgrounds in a way. But we are very similar. It's just the history that somehow divides us, which is not exactly what you said, but the level of stereotypes between East and West is just tragic, and it shows that we are still not fully integrated part of Europe. When I look at recent football matches, which we had an incident with the United Kingdom, you have certainly noticed that, but it was also, when I was going through the media, the level of emotions on both sides showed a complete misunderstanding of both, of one camp or the other. And unfortunately, this is persisting also in other stereotypical differences between East and West. So this is not the lesson, but something that I think needs much more work to be done on.
Thank you very much, and we're running out of time. I really have just very short last question, I promise. I know it's very cold, but I would like to ask all of you, just in one, 2 words, or maybe one sentence, to say your wish for Europe for a few years, for next year, next decade. Anything you want, what you would like to wish for Europe.
Okay, it's very difficult question and not many space to answer that. Okay, I think it's very important to find the common values and maybe common ground to talk and to understand things.
I think people like us who really do believe in Europe, for whom it's a fulfillment of a dream to be a Czech, a European, a Westerner, etc., a liberal, a Democrat, should be maybe more assertive. Maybe we should go more aggressively after Mr. Okamura and his hatred speech. Maybe we are too tolerant. Maybe we are. I sometimes wonder if we really have to be this tolerant in Europe, because these people just misuse our tolerance. So I would say, let's stick together across nationalities, across countries. Let's be more assertive. Notice I am not saying aggressive, assertive. And let us not lose hope. In that I am more optimistic than my younger colleague here.
Thank you, ladies.
Well, yeah, and I also think that we should be more assertive, but at the same time, we still, from what I said, I hope it was also visible that I tried to show that it is in majority a symptom, that it's not that people are bad or that they are xenophobic. So just attacking and creating polarization, I think, might be have as a result only further polarization and further misunderstanding inside the society, and maybe some, political conflicts that would go beyond the normal democratic institutions. In normal circumstances, we would talk about civil war, but I'm not going to talk about them, because we have international institutions trying to prevent that also, which are working quite well still. But my response for what Europe should somehow have as what it would contribute actually the best, or what we would wish it for. I think there are times when in history, you're looking at the United States, for example, when it were critical times, and it was enough if the country survived. On my extremely pessimistic note, I think that the better times. No. But we need to have. We have one thing that we need to be able to learn from Eastern cultures, and that's the strategic patience. And that's a longer perspective, I think. And Europe was not born in one day. Rome was not born in one day. And, thinking, now we are going through a critical situation. We lost one member state. We have a clear rule of law now, basically a legal problem, a huge problem. Problem is understatement, inside the EU. And it is under pressure from many, many points, both physically and I would say even ideologically. So I think that for the time being, I would wish for Europe to somehow stand strong and survive, and wait for I would say world circumstances and global circumstances that would be better for it to grow into maybe a more federal-like structure. But this is maybe not even for my lifetime. I think like a realistic objective. I think, but we need to be in this longer perspective. That's what I would also wish Europe to think in this perspective, not 5 years of the Commission's mandate. Thank you.
I'd like to add one thing, that my younger son, he's 7, and he dreams about European United States. So for him, Europe is like strong country, which can, as strong as United States and China. So maybe for younger generation, the European Union will be like the real common country. Absolutely. And not like the national states, but sometimes it's really very interesting to talk with him about the European United States and its role in the global society.
Okay, so I would really like to thank all of you. I think for all the questions. I really appreciate our great speakers. Thank you for coming, even in this awful weather. But I think it was amazing discussion. Thank you, Linda Sokáčová. Also, thank you, Monika Pajerová and Aleš Chmelař. Thank you very much, and thank you. And hopefully we'll see you soon with all of you during our next debates or in any events, basically. And thank you for Festival of Democracy for having us. Okay, have a good day.